at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We got to unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his.
Oh.
And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped. Enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters. Wednesday, November 20th. I'm Dean Obeidallah. In the time of impeachment, I'm even needier. I'm on Twitter at Dean Obeidallah. Drop me an email, dean@deanofradio.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts about impeachment coverage, what you want to hear more about. Obviously, that's what we're covering tonight in detail. Gordon Sondland today, his testimony made it 100% guaranteed Donald Trump will be impeached. I don't know if he'll be removed in the Senate. That's a tall order, but he will be impeached. And that's really the takeaway from Sondland's testimony. Right now, Laura Cooper, the Special Assistant to Secretary of Defense for Russia and Ukraine, is testifying, along with David Hale, Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. I'll touch on their testimony a little later based on their deposition transcripts. They both make some pretty good points. Nothing as stunning as what you would have seen, what we heard from Gordon Sondland today. But they make some interesting points that need to be examined. And I think one of them makes an excellent point that undermines Donald Trump's complete argument that he withheld the aid or did anything to fight corruption. And I don't think anyone who's sane will believe that last part, that it was about corruption. But what one of the testimonies of Laura Cooper is really great on that point here. So let's go through some of Gordon Sondland. You know, we're going to play some clips here. I've got to tell you, I want to read a tweet from Donald Trump last month about Gordon Sondland, the ambassador. As a reminder, he's the ambassador to the EU. He paid $1 million for that job. He's a rich hotel guy who was a Republican, who during the primary did not like Trump, but came around to him so much, he gave him $1 million for his inaugural committee. And last month, Trump tweets on October 8th, praising Sondland. I would love to send Ambassador Sondland, a really good man and great American, to testify, but unfortunately be testifying before a totally compromised kangaroo court. Well, I don't think Donald Trump likes his testimony anymore. Here's some of the big takeaways, and we're going to play some clips, but let me sum up a bit. Play some clips. We're going to have Congressman Ted Lieu, the bottom of the hour, was on House Judiciary Committee, which is the next committee to take over. So once this all goes to judiciary, we're not going to get any judiciary members on because they'll be working on the articles of impeachment. But I'm so glad to get him on. We had Jamie Raskin last week and Sheila Jackson Lee, all on judiciary. Big takeaways. Gordon Sondland made it clear he was, quote, following the president's orders, close quote. And the idea he was coordinating all of his actions with the chain of command. He kept making a point, there was no separate irregular chain of diplomacy, some shadow chain. Everything he was doing, he said, following the president's orders. Second, he absolutely established quid pro quo because he used those words. I think they're useless words in this, but he used them. And we'll play the clip, but he said, I know that members of this committee have frequently framed these complicated issues in the form of a simple question. Was there quid pro quo? Sondland adds, with regard to the requested White House call and White House meeting, the answer is yes. So you have that. And secondly, the big question is, was there quid pro quo, or make it even simpler, did Donald Trump withhold military aid until they would announce an investigation into Joe Biden? And that one is a little bit more murky. And I'll play clips of Sondland because early in his testimony, it was extremely clear. He was saying this. And I got to tell you, there's something amiss here because I went back and looked at the testimony of Bill Taylor. He's the ambassador in especially the charge d'affaires. He was appointed after Yovanovitch was fired. And Tim Morrison, who testified yesterday, who's a Republican, who's a Trumper, by the way. Their testimony, their private testimony, was very clear. They were both told by Gordon Sondland on different occasions, directly, independent of each other, that the president, this is what Sondland said, Trump told me they're not getting military aid unless they announce the investigation. It was very clear Sondland told him that. Both of them testified under oath to that. No one was challenged on it. That was all believable. Sondland begins his testimony today saying, yes, that's exactly it. And then later it comes out, I'm not going to say he backpedals, but when pressed about who told you that if you do not, that the aid will be withheld unless the Ukrainians say, we're going to investigate Joe Biden, he would not say a human being told him that. He said it was 2 + 2 = 4, which is actually the words of Daniel Goldman, the prosecutor, but he repeated that over and over. The scenarios are here. One, this was all a Gordon Sondland plot. That's ridiculous, so he can rule that out. I'm just going through the scenarios. Two, Gordon Sondland, based on his own hunch and gut reaction, based on dealing with Donald Trump, believed that's what Donald Trump wanted and told people that and was perhaps wrong. Three, someone directly told Gordon Sondland that's what Donald Trump wants, and Gordon Sondland just repeated that. I think it's most likely three. I mean, the one in number two where he misinterpreted, maybe he wanted to seem like a bigger shot than he was, and, I talk to the president all the time, and this is what he told me. But Gordon Sondland was very clear. He wanted this aid released. He was trying to get it released. There's no disputing that. Others back that up. I could be wrong, of course. I'm not saying 100% right. But my gut is somebody told him that Donald Trump wants you to withhold his aid and make that clear. It will be withheld until there's just simply an announcement of an investigation. That was very, very clear. That's a big takeaway. Donald Trump didn't really want an investigation. He wanted an announcement there'd be an investigation because that's what he wants, the political upside. He just wants to be able to say, hey, look, Joe Biden's being investigated. No one believes Donald Trump wants to root out corruption. Donald Trump is corruption. We know this. Trumpers know this. Nobody pretends that. That's completely unbelievable. I am so curious, and maybe I just need motivation. It's just it's me as a human being. I need to know the why. But I'm going to guess somebody told Sondland this is what Trump wants. And that person could have been wrong. I don't know. It could have been Trump. It could have been Mike Pompeo, which to me seems like the likely suspect in all of this. I could be wrong. Rudy Giuliani, I think he would have gladly thrown Giuliani under the bus. So if it was Rudy, I think he would have said it, but maybe it was Rudy. Maybe it was someone surrounding Rudy. Maybe it was Rick Perry. Maybe it was Mike Pence. All these people he implicated today who went crazy. Mike Pence put out a statement in real time through his chief of staff saying, I was never told about the quid pro quo. Rick Perry put out a statement in the middle of the hearing saying, no, Rudy Giuliani attacked the Republican counsel during the testimony. Team Trump went crazy today. So you got a sense how compelling and scary Sondland's testimony was today. I thought, just looking at him and listening to him, assessing his credibility, it's not a man I know, but I'm just based on what I've seen of him. I think he's moderately credible. I don't think he's a liar. I think that he sort of hedged a little bit here and there. And I really think he's protecting somebody. And that person could be him ultimately. I can't tell you that's not true because there's no doubt Donald Trump withheld the aid. There's no doubt Donald Trump withheld the aid for some corrupt purpose because the corruption doesn't make sense. That's nothing. To me, and I said this last night, I think for Donald Trump, withholding aid to the Ukraine was a win-win proposition. And what I mean by that is, one, he withholds the aid and subtly, maybe he wasn't going to directly, subtly wants the Ukrainians to make the announcement about Biden over the aid, or maybe even expressly. So one is he gets the announcement. Second, he doesn't get the announcement, and the aid expires on September 30th. That's the end of our fiscal year, the end of September. The aid will have expired, went back to Treasury, would have required an act of Congress to allocate. If the money was not allocated, who was then really happy that hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid did not go to the Ukraine? Donald Trump's benefactor, Vladimir Putin. That's who's extremely happy about this. So to me, it was a win-win proposition for Donald Trump. I think for the impeachment of Donald Trump, it's abuse of power just to withhold a meeting, an official meeting. That's an action of government. So it's an abuse of power to withhold a meeting of the president with a foreign leader contingent on investigating his political opponent. That's definitely abuse of power. That's impeachable. We have obstruction. We have federal election campaign finance violations as well. and it potentially goes to bribery and extortion. If the aid is withheld and that can be proven, and the reason was it was being withheld for the sole purpose of pushing the Ukrainians to investigate Donald Trump's 2020 opponent, it's going to be really hard for Republicans to defend that. That's why they were so animated today. If you watched it, Republicans so hard pressing Sondland. They know that. That's the hill they're going to die on, because if that gives way, if someone else comes forward and undermines it and says, Trump told me to say this, or this was by Trump directly, that's potentially enough for Republicans to go to Trump and go, it's time for you to go. Potentially, not for sure. So let's play some clips. It's really important to hear some of the stuff directly. First of all, I found this very compelling. Gordon Sondland made a point at the outset that he is there over the objection of the White House and the State Department. He also made an extremely important point. He can't get his documents to go through to prepare for testimony because the White House and Pompeo are withholding them. They would not even let him confer with staff members to recreate, to make sure he got his memory right on certain meetings. Now, that gives him a great out. That's great on one level, but it tells you what's going on. The obstruction of justice by the Trump administration is so clear, because when you heard the testimony today, you're like, wow, we really need to hear from Mick Mulvaney. We need to hear from Mike Pompeo. And yesterday testimony, like, we need to hear from John Eisenberg, National Security Council lawyer. We need to hear from John Bolton. We need to hear from Charles Cooperman, who was John Bolton's assistant. But we can't because of one person, Donald Trump. He's preventing us from hearing from these witnesses. And I can assure you, the reason he's preventing them is not because they're going to make Trump look good. They're going to make him look bad. That's a common sense inference you can take from that. So let's play some. Here's Sondland on he can't get his records from the White House. It's unbelievable. Clip number 1, please.
10 hours of deposition testimony. And I did so despite 10 hours of deposition testimony. And I did so despite directives from the White House and the State Department that I refused to appear, as many others have done. I agreed to testify because I respect the gravity of the moment, and I believe I have an obligation to account fully for my role in these events. But I also must acknowledge that this process has been challenging, and in many respects, less than fair. I have not had access to all of my phone records, State Department emails, and many, many other State Department documents. And I was told I could not work with my EU staff to pull together the relevant files and information. Having access to the State Department materials would have been very helpful to me in trying to reconstruct with whom I spoke and met and when and what was said.
So you're very clear. Donald Trump does not want him to get the information he needs, the papers, or even the staff support. And it's part of the obstruction. It's an absolute stonewalling. Article 3 of the impeachment article against Richard Nixon was for this very thing. Now here's Gordon Sondland naming names, folks. And this freaked out the entire Trump world, freaking out today when this happened. Here's right off the bat, Gordon Sondland telling us who he was working with and who was directing him. Clip number 2.
First, Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and I worked with Mr. Rudy Giuliani on Ukraine matters at the express direction of the President of the United States. We did not want to work with Mr. Giuliani. Simply put, we were playing the hand we were dealt. We all understood that if we refused to work with Mr. Giuliani, we would lose a very important opportunity to cement relations between the United States and Ukraine. So we followed the president's orders.
So you've got that, and then he names Mike Pence, which freaked out Mike Pence. Clip number 3.
Now, you mentioned that you also had a conversation with Vice President Pence before his meeting with President Zelensky in Warsaw, and that you raised the concern you had as well that the security assistance was being withheld because of the president's desire to get a commitment from Zelensky to pursue these political investigations. What did you say to the vice president?
I was in a briefing with several people, and I just spoke up and I said, it appears that everything is stalled until this statement gets made. words to that effect, and that's what I believe to be the case based on, the work that the three of us had been doing, Volker, Perry, and myself. And the vice president nodded like, he heard what I said, and that was pretty much it, as I recall.
So if that was stunning to Mike Pence, he would have maybe said, like, what are you talking about? But if not, so he brought Mike Pence into this circle of potential criminality, which made the Pence people put out a statement in real time going, we don't know any of this kind of stuff, blah, 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 blah. Very carefully crafted. It does not answer everything. So let's go to some of the stunning stuff. Here's the opening statement where Gordon Sondland makes it very clear there was quid pro quo in regards to the meeting. And what he means is no meeting. If you're not going to get a meeting unless you investigate Joe Biden. So here is the next clip.
Fourth, as I testified previously, Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. Mr. Giuliani demanded that Ukraine make a public statement announcing the investigations of the 2016 election, DNC server, and Burisma. Mr. Giuliani was expressing the desires of the President of the United States, and we knew these investigations were important to the President.
And then he goes on for the big thing, where he connects the withholding of the aid, the military aid, to an investigation. Let's hear clip number 5, please.
Fifth, in July and August of 2019, we learned that the White House had also suspended security aid to Ukraine. I was adamantly opposed to any suspension of aid. I was adamantly opposed to any suspension of aid, as the Ukrainians needed those funds to fight against Russian aggression. I tried diligently to ask why the aid was suspended, but I never received a clear answer. Still haven't to this day. In the absence of any credible explanation for the suspension of aid, I later came to believe that the resumption of security aid would not occur until there was a public statement from Ukraine committing to the investigations of the 2016 elections and Burisma, as Mr. Giuliani had demanded. I shared concerns of the potential quid pro quo regarding the security aid with Senator Ron Johnson, and I also shared my concerns with the Ukrainians.
So what I found interesting, it's a small line in there. He goes, I don't even know to this day why the aid was withheld. I've not heard a credible, that's his word, credible explanation. Yet Donald Trump has made a statement saying two different statements. I did it to fight corruption, and I did it because the other EU countries are not shipping in to help Ukraine. But Gordon Sondland is saying, despite that, and he knows those things, he has not heard a credible reason yet for why. And that could have been just him writing an answer, and that was his opening statement, or a thoughtful comment that what Trump said so far is just not credible. We don't know the answer because he wasn't pressed on that. The Democrats, I thought, did a really good job in some way. The Republicans came back. They found one place to keep going at Sondland later in the testimony, which was Trump didn't tell you specifically you're going to withhold military aid unless you get an investigation. They announced the investigation. But here is a couple of things Adam Schiff doing really well. What Adam Schiff here is doing, folks, is fulfilling all the elements for crimes, bribery and extortion. Here's first on quid pro quo on the announcement of an investigation to get a meeting in the White House. And listen to Adam Schiff use the term official action because he is fulfilling an element for essentially extortion here or bribery. Clip number 6.
And in fact, you had a discussion, communication with the Secretary of State in which you said that logjam over aid could be lifted if Zelensky announced these investigations, right?
I don't recall saying the logjam over aid. I recall saying the logjam.
That's what you meant, right, Ambassador?
I meant that whatever was holding up the meeting, whatever was holding up our deal with Ukraine, I was trying to break. Again, I was presuming.
Well, here's what you said in your testimony a moment ago.
Okay.
Page 18. But my goal at the time was to do what was necessary to get the aid released, to break the logjam. Okay, that's still your testimony, right?
Yeah.
So The military aid is also an official act. Am I right?
Yes.
This is not President Trump's personal bank account he's writing a check from. This is $400 million of U.S. taxpayer money, is it not?
Absolutely.
And there was a logjam in which the president would not write that U.S. check, you believed, until Ukraine announced these two investigations the president wanted, correct?
And then you have this official act stuff, and what Schiff is doing like a prosecutor. He was a prosecutor, is fulfilling the elements of what will be in the articles of impeachment, and that's just important to fill that up. Here's the last thing. This is a quick thing. Congressman Maloney, near the end of the testimony, just trying to get Sondland to admit that announcing an investigation to Joe Biden would help Donald Trump. And Sondland really does not want to say that, which makes me think still Gordon Sondland is trying to protect Donald Trump. And perhaps it is Donald Trump told him that we're withholding this aid, and he will not state that directly. Instead, he gave the line about no quid pro quo, and that's a little speculation. I'm going to be honest. But here's clip number 8.
When he asked you about investigations, which we all agree now means the Bidens, we just did this about 30 seconds ago. It's a pretty simple question, isn't it? I guess I'm having trouble why you can't just say.
When he asked about investigations, I assumed he meant.
I know what you assumed.
Company.
But who would benefit from an investigation of the Bidens?
They're two different questions.
I'm just asking you one. Who would benefit from an investigation of the Bidens?
I assume President Trump would benefit.
There we have it, see? Didn't hurt a bit, did it?
The crowd just erupted into applause there. So, all right, so what we're going to do, there's more clips to play. We'll get into that a little bit more. I want to go through a little bit of the testimony of, while I'm watching them play out in real time, Laura Cooper and David Hale are testifying right now. I'll tell you a little bit later about what they said in their private testimony, what is actually important. It's not firecrack, not explosions, but it's kind of important. But we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We talk to Congressman Ted Lieu for a little bit, a few minutes. Then we have the whole next hour to take phone calls. So the whole next hour is phone calls, so don't go anywhere. Be right back with more of the Dean Obeidallah Show.
You're listening to the Dean Obeidallah Show, where we crush Trump's lies every single day.
On Sirius XM Progress 127.
The Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here Wednesday, November 20th. Right now, very happy to have back on the show Congressman Ted Lieu, a Democrat representing California's 33rd District. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee and House Foreign Affairs. and before that in the U.S. Air Force and JAG Corps, which is relevant to what we're talking about a little bit with the idea of prosecutions. Congressman Lou, how are you tonight?
I'm great, Dean. Thank you for having me on your show.
I'm glad we got you like a quick breath here, because this is all going to your committee pretty soon, Judiciary, right? So you over there will be going nuts, I imagine. It'll be focused on articles and whatever. By the way, when it gets to Judiciary, once they're done in Intel, do you think you'll call witnesses, or will you just be based on a report that they write in Intel committee and do your hearings from there?
That decision has not been made yet.
Okay. Just wondering. So what was your reaction to Ambassador Gordon Sondland? I know you have other committees you're on and doing stuff, but from what you heard about Ambassador Gordon Sondland and his testimony, what's your reaction to that?
I thought it was devastating to Donald Trump for three reasons.
Mm-hmm.
First, he is a Trump supporter and donor who gave $1 million to Trump's inaugural. Second, he testified that this bribery scheme was at, quote, the express direction, unquote, of the president.
Mm-hmm.
And third, he clearly set forward that there was a quid pro quo between the administration and pressuring Ukraine to launch two bogus investigations.
And what do you make? The Republicans made a big deal of the fact that Sondland said it was never like Trump telling him directly the idea of you've got to withhold the aid, and we're going to withhold the aid until they make an announcement, investigation. But you had others, Taylor and Morrison, testifying that Sondland told them. So either Sondland made it up, Sondland misinterpreted Trump, or Sondland might be protecting someone. And that's what I'm trying to get my head around here.
Well, what Sondland clearly did say is that at the express direction of the president, Sondland was to basically work with Rudy Giuliani.
Right. That's
Rudy Giuliani clearly tells him that the aid, as well as their White House meeting, is conditioned on the Ukrainians making a public statement that they're going to be investigating Biden as well as this crazy DNC server Ukraine issue. So if you look at the actual call record that we have, the president's own words, it's not as if Donald Trump is asking about investigating the DNC server and Biden, and Giuliani is saying investigate Elizabeth Warren and Amazon. There's no daylight between Giuliani and Donald Trump, and Sondland is following Giuliani's orders. So it's pretty clear to me, based on Sondland's testimony, that the president is the mastermind of this bribery scheme.
Oh, I agree with you. That's why I just think there's something missing there, because it's interesting. In another scenario, if Trump did not release his transcript, which I call his confession, he might have some plausible deniability that he never said Biden to anyone. It was the other people saying it. But we started this with him in a transcript where he says Biden twice. And so you've got the final chapter of the book, which is going backwards at this point. That's what it appears to be.
Yes. So this is interesting. It's a good point you make. It's as if the Nixon tapes came out first.
Right. Yeah.
Basically, we have the most damning evidence coming out first, which is the president's own words. And the Republicans have this ludicrous argument that Giuliani is freelancing, except he's freelancing on the exact same bribery demands that Donald Trump made in the call record, of which we have his own words, which is going after Biden and the DNC server.
So this might sound conspiratorial, and if it is, tell me. I'm not a conspiracy person. I'm just trying to think out of the box here. Is there a chance that Trump was withholding the aid to Ukraine, not to really get Ukraine to do anything, but just to help Russia? Because not giving hundreds of $millions in military aid to the Ukraine actually helps Vladimir Putin.
So I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Donald Trump's foreign policy is very ineffective and chaotic. Mm-hmm. There is, however, a single line running through all of it, which is his decisions benefit Russia.
Right.
He's been attacking NATO. That benefits Russia. His decision in Syria benefited Russia so much that now there is a Russian flag flying over a U.S. air base,
mm-hmm.
and the Russians are doing propaganda on them taking over U.S. military facilities. And then in terms of Ukraine, his views are aligned with Russia. So it's possible. I think the fact that Mick Mulvaney at a press conference explicitly said there was this quid pro quo, and for us to get over it, I think that really puts that argument to rest.
It's very interesting. It's interesting. And look, there are things like Sondland said, I presume, today, and they made a big deal. But the reality is Democrats, you have subpoenaed Mick Mulvaney and National Security Council lawyer John Eisenberg and want Giuliani to testify and even Pompeo. They're stonewalling everything. So what do you do? I mean, do you just continue going forward because going to the courts is just take too long?
So we would love if these witnesses would testify, such as Mick Mulvaney or John Bolton and so on. But if they don't, we're not going to wait to, serve a subpoena and have it go through the whole court process. There's already enough evidence that has come out, especially with Sondland's testimony, that Donald Trump was the mastermind of this bribery scheme. And the president, if he feels like there's exculpatory evidence, he can certainly have Mick Mulvaney come and testify under oath, and we'd be happy to hear him.
But he doesn't want to. And I guess the inference, not to lawyer this too much, but the inference is the people he's withholding and the documents he's withholding don't help him. They probably hurt him. And I think it's a fair argument to be made. That's
absolutely right. The American people can certainly draw the inference that all the documents the White House is withholding from Congress are bad for the president. Otherwise, they would release them right now.
I'm chatting with Congressman Ted Lieu, a Democrat from California's 33rd District. What do you make of Trump? They're trying to say, it's about corruption, fighting corruption. Yet the only thing Trump talks about is Burisma and the Bidens in the 2 phone calls. And if you look at it, I mean, there was a lot of corruption in the Ukraine. Even leading up to this, there was a military procurement corruption scandal. Trump didn't ask about any of that. Does it fly in the face of common sense to say that Donald Trump was actually worried about corruption? That's why he withheld the aid?
The Republicans' line of defense makes no sense because Donald Trump never mentions corruption in either of his 2 phone calls with Ukrainian President Zelensky. In addition, President Trump's own budget actually cut anti-corruption efforts that the U.S. was doing. Mm-hmm. And we had George Kent and other witnesses testified that if you're concerned about corruption, the way you deal with it is you strengthen judicial systems, you make sure that there aren't political prosecutions. You don't single out an American citizen and tell Ukrainians to investigate that person. That is actually corruption in and of itself.
It's like there's like an ocean of corruption, and the only fish you pick is the one named Biden, and go, that's the fish I want you to look at. Because if you look at it, just Google it, folks. We'll talk about it later in the show how much corruption there was even in the spring being documented in Ukraine, and it really is endemic. But Trump didn't approach any of that, didn't address any of that. By the way, when you're back in your district now, are people talking to you about impeachment? Are they raising this as an issue?
They are, although for several weeks it was about the fires. And so we did have
of course,
the fires in my district. Sure. Our first responders were amazing, but we're working right now to make sure that people get the assistance they need from the federal government for those who were hurt by the fires.
And by the way, is government still functioning, even though we're all talking about impeachment? I saw there was some stopgap budget deal done so we don't close the government down. But anything else chance to pass, or very unlikely in this scenario, this climate?
So the House of Representatives actually has been one of the most productive House sessions in U.S. history. We've now passed over 275 bipartisan bills.
Yep.
They're now stuck on Mitch McConnell's desk. And so we've been very productive. In addition, the Judiciary Committee today, by the way, also passed legislation that would legalize cannabis. And so we're moving along and passing bills. And so we had a bipartisan bill today that also funded government until December 20th. So we're continuing to go forward.
Yeah, and that's what I saw Trump tweeted earlier in the week about Democrats do nothing. I'm like, you're lying because Democrats have passed a legion of bills. We've talked about on this show with various members, and Mitch McConnell, because of Trump, they just stand up to it and don't let anything pass, from background checks for guns to the Equality Act, and the list goes on. It's like bill.
That's right.
Bill
Even
after bill.
something as simple as the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act. How could you not pass that? Well, Mitch McConnell has decided not to put that up for a vote.
It's unreal. And last thing, is there any timetable overall that the leadership has said to end this? Because it looks like we are winding down with public hearings, obviously, tomorrow, but doesn't mean there won't be more in the near future. Any timetable?
There's no timetable, but I believe if we're going to go down the road to formal articles of impeachment, that we should do it before the end of the year.
And then there'd be a trial in the Senate.
That is correct.
Well, it's a remarkable time to see this and holding Trump accountable because look at the guy. Look how brazen he is, Congressman. The day after Robert Mueller testifies, there he is on the phone, literally the day after mocking Mueller to another leader of another country, mocks Mueller, and then asks Zelensky to interfere in the 2020 election. He's learned nothing. He has to be held accountable. I don't care what they do in the Senate. Thank you in the House for holding this man accountable.
And you're absolutely right about the brazenness. While Ambassador Yovanovitch was testifying, he was trying to intimidate her in real time. That is how brazen this president is.
Well, Congressman Lou, thank you for your time. And if I don't talk to you, have a great Thanksgiving. Hopefully chat with you in December and keep up the great work. You guys are doing a great job in the House.
Thank you.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Let's take a quick break, folks. We'll come back. We'll take calls. We have a lot of time for calls. We have calls right through 8 o'clock, which is, if you're not on Eastern time, like an hour and 20 minutes. I got more clips to play, more things to talk about. But I want to hear from you when we come back. 866-997-4748. Be right back. At this point, the question is not who connected to Donald Trump as a criminal. The question is anyone connected to Donald Trump who's not a criminal?
The Dean Obeidallah Show. Sirius XM Progress.
And in fact, you had a discussion, communication with the Secretary of State in which you said that logjam over aid could be lifted if Zelensky announced these investigations, right?
I don't recall saying the logjam over aid. I recall saying the logjam. I don't know that.
That's what you meant, right, Ambassador?
I meant that. Fifth, in July and August of 2009.
Well, here's what you said in your testimony a moment ago.
Okay.
Page 18. But my goal at the time was to do what was necessary to get the aid released, to break the logjam. Okay, that's still your testimony, right?
Yeah.
You've heard Dean's thoughts.
Now it's your turn.
866-99-SIRIUS. 866-997-4748. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show.
On Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. So some breaking news, and I'm watching it in the commercials, but breaking news here. A Pentagon official who's testifying, right? Because there's two people testifying now. There's Laura Cooper, Special Assistant to the Ukraine, and David Hale, Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, testified that the Ukrainians were concerned about the U.S. military aid on the day of Donald Trump's phone call on July 25th. Now, that's backed up, and I imagine that is true, that is a game changer because Republicans kept going, well, the Ukrainians didn't even know when Trump was talking to them, the aid was being withheld. And to me, that made no sense because what we give them in military aid amounts to 10% of their entire military budget. I would imagine they would have noticed that pretty quickly when it didn't come in. I mean, 10% of their total budget, and they're in a hot war with Russia. So this is not huge game changers, these witnesses. They're filling in blanks. I'm going to take calls. At the top of the hour, I'll tell you a little bit about what they testified in the deposition. But let me take calls for now. Let's go to our friend Michael in the Bronx. Hey, Michael. How are you, buddy?
Hey, Dean. So glad you got to me.
Sure, my friend. How are you tonight?
Well, I'm digesting all of this as much as you are. And I guess you saw my emails. One thing I forgot to tell you.
What?
That I've been DVRing the impeachment inquiry in full and then up to like about 4 or 5 discs now. been taping throughout the whole day because I want to see everything uncut. I don't want anybody giving me bullshit saying, "Oh, you're getting your stuff from MSNBC or from this channel or from that channel." No, I want to see the whole thing, by myself, bit by bit. With that said, and from what I've known, and granted from what you have said and the news reports, I want to give these Republicans some cold hard fact reminders, and that is, you look through the U.S. Constitution. I do not recall anywhere in the Constitution that has the name Donald J. Trump in it.
No, not there.
Reason why I say that is because all you Republican rat asses each took an oath upon going into office, saying that you will uphold the laws and the Constitution of the United States. And your despicable behavior in pledging loyalty to Trump instead of loyalty to this nation, to this laws and the Constitution, cannot be ignored and swept under the rug. As far as I'm concerned, you rat bastards have been aiding and abetting a criminal, and you would go as far as to just ridicule and insult the military and those that have been testifying to the truth and sticking with their oaths of service. Oh, now all of a sudden they're unpatriotic? Since when the fuck does Trump mean patriotism? Is this what this whole thing of never Trumpers is coming towards? This is an act of organized crime that we're dealing with here. And you Republicans are going to have to look into deep in your hearts and souls, if you ever have any, as to who the hell are you going to be defending? Are you defending this nation, or are you defending Donald Trump and thus engaging in this particular organized crime? Are you part of it, or does Trump have a bounty on your heads? You're going to have to come clean because all the shit is really hitting the fan. And quite frankly, Republicans, you owe each and every one of us, especially minorities, the blacks, the Latinos, the Muslims. See, Dean, I'm sticking up for you, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
On the fact of every single false accusation you made against us. Don't you ever talk to us about being unpatriotic when you're placing Trump above it, when you join in chorus with him, and you also owe an apology to the NFL players. This bullshit, taking a knee during the national anthem, is unpatriotic and disrespectful to the military. Meanwhile, the orange son of a bitch in the White House has taken military aid, stealing from the military for a fucked up war. I mean, I can go on and on, but I think you get the idea.
I get the idea, my friend. Unfortunately, today your phone is not the best connection, but you're not as clear as you are. Your words are clear. Your connection is not, unfortunately. But, Michael, I love your passion, my friend. And look, this is the way it's got to be. I come at this in a way almost from a legal point of view, but I made it very clear. Donald Trump has made it. There's a choice you have to make. If you're a Trump supporter, do you support the United States Constitution or you support Donald Trump? I really wish you would pick the Constitution. I want you to pick the Constitution. I'm pleading you to put the Constitution over Donald Trump. It is your choice. We are all watching you. It's up to you. And for the Republicans who will do this, the House and the Senate will vote against impeachment and against removal, we must make them pay a price for this, because if they don't, then they're not held accountable either for enabling a man to violate his oath of office who is involved in bribery and extortion. As Glenn Kirshner was on last night, a former federal prosecutor said there are two different crimes and he's fulfilled the elements of both. And you see him on MSNBC all the time, but he's a former JAG Army officer who was a 22-year prosecutor in federal court. He was very blunt about what he sees. So, Michael, nice chatting with you, brother. I appreciate it. Keep it with the passion. So let's take another call here. We have one more break or two more breaks? All right, good. We'll take more calls. Here's Impeachment Mike. Impeachment Mike, what's up?
Hey, Dean, I wanted to ask you a couple questions and then make a quick statement. Number one question I have is that did you say in the beginning of your show tonight that when you read the private testimony that you saw that Gordon Sondland admitted that he was advised that the aid was tied to these investigations?
No, he's the guy that didn't say that, and then he amended his testimony, revised it afterwards once all these other people were saying there was all these conversations about aid, and he said, I don't have the exact part in front of me that he used the term presume. I presumed there's a connection between the announcement of an investigation into Biden and the releasing of the aid. Who did say that in their private testimony? Both Tim Morrison testified yesterday, and Bill Taylor, the ambassador to Ukraine now, the temporary one, said they were told by Sondland directly in two different settings, not together, that Gordon Sondland told him that he had spoken to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump told him this very thing. So my point is we're missing something, because today Sondland testified, Trump never told me directly to withhold it. So did he lie to those guys? That's a little bizarre. Is he protecting Trump, or did someone else tell him that Trump said that they're linked, and that Sondland doesn't want to give that person up, or is, for whatever reason, or fears he made a wrong assumption? I can't answer that question, but something is amiss when you look at the testimony of Taylor and of Morrison. In the new hour, on the top of the hour, I'll read a little of their testimony so people can hear exactly what I'm talking about. Something's up. I don't know what's up. He's trying to protect someone, Sondland. It could be himself, frankly, but I think it's Trump, or it could be. It's not like he's friends with anyone there for a long time. Pompeo? I don't think Rudy Giuliani. I think anyone's happy to throw Rudy under the bus. I think it could be Pompeo. It's hard to say.
Because the common thread that he had today was, in the last few days, is that when they were told investigations, that implied the 2016 election and Burisma.
Right.
Okay? So my question is, or a couple things I want to point out is, number one is that since he admitted today in his opening statement that they did not want to work with Rudy Giuliani, why then did they move forward with doing it? And his answer is that they wanted to make sure that they had this meeting to hopefully advance the relationship between the two countries, okay?
Right.
So my point is that why would they be willing to work with someone who's not even an official governmental employee, but rather the president's personal attorney? Why would they not think that would be some type of security, breach of security by working with someone that has not been Senate confirmed, has no official governmental designation, nothing. That's number one.
But you know the answer, because as the truth is, what we've heard, Donald Trump directed them to work with him. Everyone said that. Volker said we don't want to work with him. Sondland said we didn't want to work with him. Bolton didn't want to work with him. Donald Trump said, you've got to work with Giuliani. He's my guy. They had no choice. That's why Sondland testified under the direction of Donald Trump. That's exact words. We work with Rudy Giuliani. They were told directly, you must go work with Rudy. So he had no choice.
So number two is that Gordon Sondland is the ambassador to the European Union.
Yes.
Okay? So there has to be other countries, particularly in Europe, that also experience corruption and bribery.
Sure.
Okay? So out of all the countries that Donald Trump was focused on corruption, as the Republicans are trying to make us believe was his main intention, then why would you have the ambassador to the European Union not investigate corruption in European countries, but rather a country that does not fall into that classification? Okay? So
Mike,
another point
that's a good question, and to piggyback on that question here, you had Sondland. If you didn't watch it today, Sondland kept saying, I kept hearing about Burisma, but I didn't know the Bidens were involved in it. And he talked about Burisma like he had no idea what Burisma was. And and why didn't the Democrats press him on? So you kept talking about Burisma. You had no idea what this word meant or what the company was about. Why were you furthering this? Why were you along the ride? Let's have an investigation into Burisma. You didn't even Google it, because Bill Taylor, the ambassador, he said he didn't know what it was. He Googled it, and Hunter Biden's name came up, and he knew instantly what was going on. Why? I mean, It's not believable to me that Gordon Sondland, a guy who started a business, multi-million-dollar hotel here in Pacific Northwest, didn't go, I don't know what the word Burisma means. It could be a Ukrainian word. I don't know. I should Google it. I should ask someone. Of course he asked someone. It's completely unbelievable and incredible to believe he didn't ask someone or was not curious about what does Burisma mean.
It's a segue into my next point, is that the reason that so for him to claim that he didn't understand the Bidens were connected to Burisma is a bunch of BS.
It's so unbelievable. Yes, I agree.
It's totally unbelievable, okay? Yeah. Because out of all the companies and places in Ukraine that also experience corruption, he had to have known that the reason Donald Trump wanted to pick this company, this small company, Burisma, had to be something out of the ordinary, okay? And the last point I want to make just real quick is that I am 95% sure that within the last week or two, I heard that once Congress appropriates money, that there is one more step to verify that the country receiving that money is not experiencing corruption to prevent that money from getting where it needs to go. Is that correct?
It depends on the country. In the case of the Ukraine, it was certified in May. In fact, the testimony that's going on right now touches on that very point. That's the testimony of Laura Cooper, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, testified in May 2019. The Department of Defense, in coordination with the interagency, certified Ukraine had met the anti-corruption benchmark set by the Pentagon to make it eligible to receive security assistance.
Okay, so follow me just real quick. Is that if that's true in May, that's what I thought I heard.
Yeah.
Gordon Sondland claims that he had his meeting with Donald Trump in May, on May 10th, I believe it was, okay? Either May 10th or May 25th. I don't remember the exact date. So the reason I'm pointing to all this is that it was appropriated by Congress. Then it went through this second verification in May, right? So at that point, as of May, that money went through all the proper channels to be dispersed or released to Ukraine, all right? So for Sondland to begin his communications with Trump in May and continue all the way through September till it was finally released, that's 4 months we're talking about. You don't mean to tell me that Gordon Sondland didn't know that there was something out of the ordinary about this aid not being released when it had already gone through all the proper channels? Donald Trump had no legal right. He had no political right on top of that to hold the money after it went through those two steps, right?
He was abusing his power. There's an article impeachment for abuse of power that's right here in front of us. That's undisputed. The question I wanted to see if we have the elements for crime, because I want to see Donald Trump indicted and prosecuted at some point in his life for the crimes he's committed, and these are them. So, but no, you make an excellent point there. I mean, the certification was in May 2019. The testimony right now, right in front of me, with Laura Cooper is on that very point because she said it in her private deposition testimony, which was released to the public, that I went through over the weekend. So it's there. So we got it. But Peach Mike, I got to go to break, my friend. I'm running out of time at the top of the hour. But good points, Mike. I got to go. Let's take a quick break. Be right back.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.